Hello, and thank you for joining my talk, The Pentester Blueprint, a guide to becoming a pen tester. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Philip Wiley. I'm a red team lead for a global consumer products company, the adjunct professor at Richland College, now Dallas College, and I'm also the Pwn School project founder. I created the Pwn School project as a way for my students to continue their education. My very first semester, a lot of students were finishing up class and they were wanting to know what to go do from here. And also had some other people in the community wanting education in offensive security practices. So I started the Pwn School project as a way to extend education. So on this slide, you see my career broken down. So I've been in IT and InfoSec for over 22 years. Spent my first 6 years as a system administrator, 16 plus years total in network security and AppSec. This is including the pen test career. Out of that, 8.5 years I spent as a pen tester, and the first 5 years as a consultant. I break this down because if you're wanting to become a pen tester, you kind of see what I did to get into it. And I'm also the co-host of the podcast, The Uncommon Journey, hosted on ITSP Magazine with Chloe Mustagi and Alyssa Miller. So kind of go back even further in my career, before I even got into IT. When I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a living. So friends recommended me being a pro wrestler. So I did pro wrestling for a couple years, had to get a job to support my family. So I didn't have, skills that would really provide for that. So pro wrestling, I wasn't being able to wrestle enough, and it's not a lifestyle conducive to families. So I went to trade school to be an AutoCAD draftsman. And during my AutoCAD career, I found out about system administration. It seemed a lot more interesting to me than AutoCAD. So I made the switch to system administration, and eventually moved into InfoSec, spending the first part of my first year and a half doing network security, and then moved into AppSec is where I found out about penetration testing, and then moved into penetration testing. And so each semester I share the slide with my students. With great power comes great responsibility. Only hack if you have permission to hack, and even better with written permission. Hacking without permission is illegal. So make sure if you're going to do any kind of hacking, pen testing, make sure it's in your home lab or either through bug bounties. Bug bounties are a great way to get experience in live production environments. This is experience that you can use on your interviews. You can explain how you were able to find certain vulnerabilities and how you were able to exploit them, and explain that during an interview process. So this is a great place to learn and get experience. So what is pen testing? So pen testing is assessing security from an adversary's perspective, kind of assessing things the way a cyber criminal would. And so that's in hopes of discovering what a malicious actor might find, to be able to remediate those and protect against those vulnerabilities. And why pen testing? If you understand the adversarial perspective of your security posture, then you're able to better protect it. You're able to better justify remediation. Sometimes remediation is more than just making a configuration change. Sometimes remediation could mean adding a web application firewall to your network. It could entail a firewall in general, endpoint protection, other types of devices that could be costly. So if you have a pen test and vulnerabilities that prove that need to be remediated, then that's a way to justify the cost. And even better yet, if you're able to exploit those vulnerabilities, it shows, a higher need to get that remediated, as well as justifying the budget. And also pen testing is very popular due to compliance, regulatory compliance, especially PSI DSS, payment card industry data security standard. A lot of jobs popped up from that. Whenever I was getting started in pen testing, it was mainly consultants and contractors back in 2012. And now, due to PCI and companies that are processing a certain number of credit cards have to go through PCI, then they have to be PCI compliant. So this brought about the need for a lot more pen testing, and companies couldn't afford to pay pen testers, contract wise or consulting to do all these tests. So it made more sense to bring this in-house. That way they could get pen tests done quicker. And even from that on, even bug bounties to help assist in that. Other reasons for pen testing, it's a fun job and there's a lot of career opportunities. I mean, this is one of the areas that's not totally new, but it's gained popularity and a lot more companies are realizing the need for pen testers. Pen testing jobs, formerly it's penetration testing. More commonly, more common term is pen tester. Security consultants, analysts, and engineers are usually the roles that these positions fill. There may not be a HR description as ethical hacker or pen tester, but those are typical some of the HR roles. Some other synonymous terms: ethical hacker, offensive security, adversarial security, threat and vulnerability management. Threat and vulnerability management is a very popular department that pen testers usually fall under. So when you're looking for a job, then you may need to look at the descriptions, because it could be a security analyst or a security engineer, and you just have to look at the description to see the type of tools and the duties you're performing to see that it's a pen testing job. Pen testing is valuable in other areas: SOC analysts, digital forensics, incident response, network security engineers, purple teams. This is where the offensive security works with the defenders to be able to detect the activities and block those and be able to respond to those. Also application security, where a lot of you that are viewing today, you're either a bug hunter, you're into bug bounties, or you're someone that's wanting to get into it. So the skills you build through bug bounty and application security kind of go hand in hand. So understanding the malicious traffic as a SOC analyst is very important. Security analysts and engineers understanding that traffic is also good. And then in digital forensics and incident response, if you understand the attacks, then it's going to make, it's going to give you some insight into your investigations that you may not otherwise have. Different types of pen test targets. So network, application, hardware, transportation, your different vehicles. Autonomous driving vehicles are very important to be secure, so we need to test those. People in buildings, be able to test the security of buildings, as well as the people that are employees of the company. They got badges, they go into the building, people can tailgate behind them. So those need to be tested. You can have the most secure network, most secure applications, but if someone can get past security into the building, into the data center, then it's gonna be a lot easier for them to breach a system. So it's important to test those. And then your hardware devices, your routers and switches, even your SOHO routers and switches, as well as Internet of Things and medical devices. It's interesting because during my consulting career, I did some pen testing of some hospitals, and you could see, like during wireless pen test, you could see medical devices like insulin pumps and different life support devices connected to the network. So those need to be secure and need to be tested. And this is where pen testers come into play. Be able to think like the bad guy to be able to find those vulnerabilities and protect against it. Different types of pen test knowledge. So traditionally you hear of a black box pen test, white box, and gray box. Your black box is going to be more similar to what an adversary would attack. So you're seeing more of what a real world attack would be like. So this is very limited information, maybe an IP address, maybe URLs. I did a black box pen test, more of a full scope pen test back in 2008. And all we had for the client, we knew the name of the client. We knew the address because we needed to test physical security and be able to get there to do internal network pen testing. So we were able to do recon, and I was able to find information on the company through like Shodan that we weren't able to find devices in the network blocks. So that limited information, we were able to find the IP addresses to test, and then we actually came on site, got into the building unauthorized, into the office of the client, and was able to test in one of their conference rooms. So we had limited information. So with this type of testing, it takes more time to collect information. Now the opposite end of the spectrum is your white box or crystal box testing. And this is very common in your web app pen testing, and really a needed type of test level, because that way you've got more information, you can more thoroughly test the system. So with this, you typically, especially in application, you have accounts, sometimes diagrams. Prior to the kickoff of the pen test, you will work with the developers to get a walkthrough of the application to understand how the application works, to be able to more thoroughly test it. And gray box is kind of partial knowledge. It's limited amount of IP address. The IP addresses, you basically don't get your accounts and that sort of stuff, but you have the IPs that are in scope, and then it's up to you to test. And this is what you more commonly see, like on your network pen test, just the, just the scope items to test without more information than that. And like going back to say, these are all based on time. The more time you have, then the less information you need for the test. And the more time, then you've got, you can perform the black box type testing, and with more limited time, you need more information to be able to thoroughly test it. And definitely on web application, you really want to test that, because you need to test all levels of access, administrator, just regular users of the system, to make sure you can't elevate your privileges. And even administrators don't need to be able to see account information or social security numbers. So be able to test and make sure certain data can be accessed and certain levels of privilege can be escalated to. And so different types, these are actually testing depth, are actually different steps. Some of these are part of a pen test, but as you notice the items, it says in red, not a pen test. These first two items, although they're included as steps in a pen test, they're not a pen test. Vulnerability scanning is just running Nessus or Nexpose, or running the vulnerability scanner within Burp Suite. You're looking for vulnerabilities. This is a way as a pen tester to pick those vulnerabilities up quickly and spend your time on more important stuff. But also vulnerability scans are routinely done by a group within organizations that do just vulnerability scanning. And so what you do is they run the scans periodically, every 2 weeks to a month, maybe even weekly if you have the bandwidth to be able to test that many systems, and you're able to find the low-hanging fruit and get those remediated. But in a pen test, this would be like one of the first steps you do in a pen test. So vulnerability assessments is the next level after your vulnerability scan. On your vulnerability assessment, you're going through and looking at those vulnerabilities, and you're validating them to make sure they're not false positives. Sometimes your vulnerability scanners are going to find false positives, so you want to make sure you rule those out. And you can also run other tools, do more manual testing during the vulnerability assessment phase. This is still not a pen test, but this is just a vulnerability assessment. Sometimes clients will request a vulnerability assessment. They don't want you to do a pen test because they don't want you to exploit the systems, because they're worried about taking the systems down, making them unavailable. And so this is kind of to lighten the risk. I've done actually wireless pen tests before of hospitals, and the concern by the CISO was that they're worried that something would get taken down. So we kind of revised what we were going to do on the pen test and went to an assessment. So we're just running vulnerability scans, but not actually going through and trying to exploit the systems. So the next step of this process, after you've done your vulnerability assessment, you've validated your vulnerabilities, found anything manual or using other tools, then you come to the pen test phase, the pen test level. This is actually going through and exploiting the vulnerabilities that you found during the pen test. And once you exploit those, you see if you can escalate privileges, if you're able to get lateral movement, take accounts, and connect to other systems. So that's what you test during this process. And then you have like your red team and adversarial test. This more simulates a cyber criminal or a nation state. You're going in, and it's not the importance of finding every single vulnerability. It's just finding how those can be exploited to do serious damage to the company, as far as collecting information or actually gaining access to, possibly if it's a banking system, just going through. In this, you're really focused on getting the important stuff, not wasting your stuff with just vulnerabilities. You want to focus on exploitable vulnerabilities. You're also wanting to, during this process, test the blue team, see if they're seeing you on the network, see if they're responding. And so then after you wrap up this type of engagement, then you can work with the blue team to show them corrective measures, because when this activity is going on, you want your defenders to be detecting it. So this is one way to actually test the blue team, test the people, processes, and technology, and not just test for vulnerabilities. This has become more popular due to PCI pen testing, more narrowing the scope of pen tests, and a lot of things getting overlooked. So this is starting to become more popular. You're seeing more red team jobs out there. This is a very exciting and interesting area if you're into more of the network type pen testing, although your web application pen testing skills are very important. Uh, Sometimes the network, be able to exploit the network as well as Active Directory are very important in that phase of that type of assessment. And there are specializations. You have your generalist, which just do the basic type of pen testing and cover a range of things, your wireless, your network, and your application, some light application. And then you have application. So this is web app, mobile, thick client, and cloud. And people that specialize in that area sometimes come from development as far, and also like the generalist, a lot of people like myself, that's where I started as a generalist. And I got my start because of my sysadmin background, I understand networking and operating systems. So this was easier for me to learn. And so your social engineering, testing the buildings, and through the physical security, this is also a lot of times part of a red team engagement. So those are very important skills. And then transportation specialization, there are people that are just dedicated car hackers. So they do that. So you can specialize in these, or you can learn a little bit of all of it. So the nice thing about pen testing is if you get bored in one area, you can learn other things. During my consulting career, I was fortunate enough to work for an employer that allowed me to learn other types of pen testing. When I went to work for them, I had never done Wi-Fi pen tests, but I got to learn how to do Wi-Fi pen tests. So there's a lot of different areas to work in. A lot of people like to specialize in the hardware and IoT stuff, which is a very important and more newer part of pen testing. And a lot of these skills are very transferable to security research and bug bounty. So this is the part of the talk most people are interested in. How do I become a pen tester? So to become a pen tester, you need the technological knowledge. You need to understand the technology before you can secure it, before you can break into it. So you need to understand networking and operating systems, Windows and Linux, and you need to understand these at a sysadmin level. If you get a shell to the system, and if you have the right privileges, you can shut down firewalls, start and stop services, do several other things. So once you get a shell, you need to understand that command line. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time Googling, or you're not going to, and not effectively spend your time on the pen test. Then understanding security, application hardware is also important. Knowing the security of how Windows or Linux works is a good advantage to be able to test for misconfigurations and see how you can possibly bypass those and exploit the system. And so also once you have the technology part of that foundation, then you're going to need the hacking experience. So hacking knowledge through classes, conferences and virtual conferences like this, meetings, meetups, self-study through your home labs, videos, tutorials, blogs and articles on Twitter. There's a lot of good people out there that are sharing some great information on Twitch, for the streaming, or on YouTube. A lot of good information out there. In Twitter, InfoSec Twitter. There's a lot of good security researchers and bug hunters on Twitter, and pen testers, red teamers that you can follow, that you can pick up information from. When I was getting started out in security prior to Twitter, we would go to blogs and articles to get our information, or magazines. And now we're the luxury of the researchers. When they create a new tool, it's out there quicker. We're able to get that information sooner this way. And so to become a pen tester, you also need to develop the hacker mindset. And so the hacker mindset, out of a lot of other areas in security, is one of the areas that really requires more creativity. It's a combination of creativity and analytical thinking. It's kind of similar to troubleshooting. So if you ever think about, if you installed an operating system, you install Linux for the first time and everything went well, then you go back and install another time and you have a problem with it. Then you have to troubleshoot. It's more difficult. But after you've installed something and learned how to troubleshoot it, then you know what to do next if you run into this problem. And that's the same thing with the hacker mindset. You find a vulnerability, maybe it's like an unrestricted upload, then you know that you can upload some type of shell to that system and possibly get, command line access, get a shell to that system. So you're able to chain together those type of attacks. And the more you practice, the more you're able to chain these different types of vulnerabilities and attacks together to be able to exploit a system. And so the more time you do that over and over again, you build up that base knowledge, and you just come up and you see a certain vulnerability, you know, I can do this next. So the best way to develop the hacker mindset is through repetition and hands-on hacking experience, spending your time in your lab, CTFs and that sort of thing, bug bounties, going through, and after you'll see some vulnerabilities that are very common, and then you know how to exploit those. So that way you just, you know, constantly practicing, this is the way you develop that mindset. And the Pentester blueprint formula is technology knowledge plus security knowledge plus the hacker mindset. With these things combined, you'll have what it takes to be a penetration tester. And where to start? Where do you start in this journey? You need to develop a plan and do like a gap analysis on what you're missing. So you go through and look at the skills you have that are needed, like your networking operating systems. You also look at like Linux. You know, Linux is very important as a pen tester. There's a lot of good tools, although there's tools on Windows too that can be leveraged, and I recommend knowing both of those. But going through and fill in gaps on the things you don't know. So if you're starting from scratch, a good example of where to start would be follow like the pen test, say start with A+ level certification knowledge. You don't necessarily have to get those certifications, but learn the materials from the A+ certification, learn the items from the Network Plus and the Security Plus, and now there's the Pen Test Plus. Learn those items, and that will give you a good base for pen testing. If you're wanting to do bug hunting, then maybe even spending some time learning some web development. Learning how to do web development is going to help you be a better bug hunter. So basically, when you're developing that plan, look at the pieces you're missing. And you know, if you're needing to build that hacking experience, do capture the flags, bug bounties, and build labs. And no matter what level you're at, build a lab. If you're in IT, then you know you're going to have some basic skills. So gain your Linux skills, your security skills. If you're in InfoSec and you haven't worked with Linux, learn Linux. Or say like you've got a good base knowledge, but you're lacking the hacking piece, then that's really what you're going to want to focus on. And so labs, so you need a lab when you're doing, you know, learning to be a pen tester, and even when you're an experienced pen tester, security researcher, you need a home lab so you can test your POCs or your proof of concept code. So if you have an exploit and you're doing a pen test on a production network, it's good to have a lab to be able to test these exploits in, because sometimes exploits have adverse reactions and they could take down a network, take down a system, make it unresponsive. And you want to make sure during your pen testing, you're not crashing systems. That's very important. So having a lab to be able to test that in is important as an experienced pen tester on all levels. I still do that as well. If you find a new hack out there, some new exploit, set it up in your lab and test it out and see if it works. So the different levels of labs that I've got listed here, and this can vary. These are just kind of 3 areas that I've kind of limited down to. But the Minimalist Lab is one of my favorites. So you have your laptop or your desktop that you use at home. You install like an attack VM as well as your targets. So this is very basic. If you've got like a mobile device like a laptop, then you're able to put your lab, you know, set it up on that system. If you get bored studying at home, then you can go to a coffee shop or somewhere else and study. If you're traveling, then you can still practice hacking in your labs. And then your dedicated lab, you can have like a dedicated system with your vulnerable VMs on it, and then just have your attack system set up, your system you normally use on a daily basis. That could be your attack system, and that way you're going across a network. So that simulates, you know, the going across a network piece of it. And then you can get more advanced, and you can have your separate systems. You can have like separate desktops or build servers on your network. You can set up routers and switches and firewalls and get as elaborate as if you want. And even as prior to hacking, just building a home network is a good experience. One of my very first pen testing jobs, my manager, who had been pen testing for quite some while, always recommended a team. He really wasn't telling us to go out, take pen testing courses or go to the conferences and stuff. He said, build something. You know, if you understand how to install Apache web server and you understand the directories where things are contained, understand the security, And what happens if it's not set up right, you understand how to breach that. So learning how to build stuff is a good way to learn as well. And one thing to keep in mind with your home labs, if there's something your priority is to learn the hacking piece, learning the tools, then you may want to be more simplistic with your lab, because I've run into things in the past where I had my lab and I had a hard drive go bad. That could happen on any level of lab. But the thing here is too, is the more elaborate it is, the more chance that you're going to have system failures and you're having to rebuild that. So keep that in mind. And so when you build your home lab, you're going to need a TAC platform. And so Kali Linux, Parrot OS are really two options that are great from a Linux standpoint, as well as Ubuntu. You can use Trusted Sex Pentester framework, and it's a script that will install all the tools that are like in Kali Linux or Parrot OS. So if you like Ubuntu and that's the way you want to go, this is a great way to go. I've done that before in the past. I would run like Ubuntu as my host OS with the Pentester framework tools. So I had the pen testing tools on there, and I still had like a Kali Linux VM as well as like a Windows VM with some administrative tools and some hacking tools on that. And so with Windows, you have Commando VM scripts by FireEye. You can install that set of scripts, and what that does is that contains a lot of the different pen testing tools that you'd use during a pen test that run on Windows. And then also with that, there's the Flare VM, which is FireEye scripts for reverse engineering. So you set that up on the Windows VM, you can do all sorts of reversing on that system, and then you have like a Windows device to test with. And I recommend learning how to pen test with both. There's times that using Windows may be more conducive and have tools and stuff that run natively that would be a better choice at times. So having both of those are a great option. And Parrot OS, I've really gotten to like Parrot OS up until recently. I hadn't worked with Parrot OS, but Parrot OS works really great for wireless pen testing. With some of the recent updates to Kali Linux, some of the tools broke and also with going to a lot of the things going to Python 3, the dependencies and stuff were hard to get running. So I was doing a pen test for my employer, a wireless pen test. And so I'd use Parrot OS, and I was able to get a certain alpha driver to work that I could get working on Kali Linux, as well as all the tools worked. There wasn't any things I really had to add extra to that, as well as any extra tools that I needed to add. I was able to add easily. So Parrot is really good for wireless, and also to it makes a good daily driver Linux, because security and privacy are kept in mind. There's some really good privacy plugins built into Parrot OS too. So it's a really great product, as well as the support. I was installing something the other day, and oh yes, my work test laptop, I was trying to get the video drivers to work with Hashcat. And so fortunately their website had good documentation on how to install the drivers and get it to work. So that's really great. Sometimes other distributions, it's hard to find the documents to install drivers and software properly. And so the home lab targets, you need a target to attack. So you want to create your vulnerable VMs. So you can go to VulnHub and download some VMs. There's a lot of great VMs on there. A lot of them are retired CTF VMs. People build CTFs for different conferences, and they'll later on go up and upload those to VulnHub, share those with the community. So you can download those and use those for practice targets. I've used some of those in my home lab, and it's been a really good choice. And Metasploit 2 and 3, those are two VMs I highly recommend. I would make sure to install those two, because the thing about those two, you can install version 3 on Windows, which you need practice in a Windows environment. Most of your corporate environments are going to be mainly Windows, so you need practice with that. There's a lot of vulnerable VMs on Linux due to Linux being free. Metasploitable 3 uses the free version or a limited time version of Windows, because Microsoft will post up VMs for developers to test their web apps in different browsers. So that VM of Windows, certain Windows versions is available for download for a free trial. So that's used in Metasploitable 3. OWASP has a lot of good resources. WebGoat's just one of them. There's a couple different versions of WebGoat, as well as JuiceShop on their site. A lot of vulnerable VMs, a lot of vulnerable apps, and some of those apps are online. And then you can create your own targets. ExploitDB is a good place for exploits, but it also has vulnerable software. So you can go out there and download the vulnerable versions of the software and actually use those to use the exploits against. So that's a really good way to build a lab. And you can kind of get together with some friends and you can do like CTFs. You can build a vulnerable VM that you know what's on it, but your friends don't, and you can challenge each other. So that's a good way to learn as well. And recommended reading here. Actually, one of the presenters of the conference, the very well-known Georgia Weidman, in her book, The Penetration Testing, A Hands-On Guide to Hacking. This was the book I was using for the first year of teaching at Richland College. I was teaching my ethical hacking class. And the thing I liked about this book is it shows you how to build a lab. And that's what my class lab was based off of. I later went on to the Pentest Plus to give students certifications to prepare for, since certifications can help you sometimes in your job search. So we switched to that. The Hackers Playbook 2 and 3 is what I go to next. After George's book, you're going to learn the basics of pen testing, and so the Hacker Playbook gets into more types of techniques and stuff that you're going to use in an actual real-world pen test. Version 2 and 3 are slightly different. Version 3 gets into more red teaming, so you definitely want both of these books. Start with version 2 and then go to version 3. You learn more of the red team techniques. And the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, the second edition, that is a really great place to start for web app pen testing. And also the red team field manual is also a good little handy reference for different commands and single liners for different technologies that you'll run into during a pen test. And learning resources. So this slide here, I've got it kind of split up. If you look at there's a top section, and you see there's kind of a space between. The top section are paid resources, starting with the most expensive to the least expensive. And the bottom portion are resources that are free. So we have this SANS training, which SANS training is really great. It's created by some of the industry experts. Most of these people work in consulting and they teach for SANS. They develop this content and it's really great stuff. Of taking their web application pen testing course, their ICS pen testing course, as well as the advanced pen testing and exploitation development course, which are really good. But these are typically items that you're going to have your employer to pay for, because it's like $7,200 per course, unless you do one of the 2-day courses, which is like $3,800. And then the next level down in a drastic drop in price is eLearn Security and Offensive Security. eLearn Security I really like because it really gets into good detail. And actually, if you're wanting to learn web app pen testing, they have a really good web app pen testing course. I've taken that in their mobile pen testing course. And so with them, as well as offensive security, you have to perform pen tests to pass the certification exam. And then virtual hacking labs is a nice one for preparing for the OSCP, doing network pen testing. There's like Windows and Linux systems set up in an Android system that you're able to hack. They give you hints on the easier systems. The more difficult systems, they give you less experience. So they start out easy and build you up to where you're starting to build that mindset and you don't need the help. And then you're getting to the point where you're on your own, which is good compared to like offensive security, that there's no hints there. You have to just go in and do it all on your own. That's a good way to learn. But with the virtual hacking labs, they kind of gradually help you learn those skills in advance to more difficult systems. Pentester Lab and Pentester Academy are great resources. Pentester Lab is mostly web application pen testing, but they also have some Linux security stuff in there, so you can learn how to breach and exploit Linux vulnerabilities. If there's a possibility to get a shell on a system, they show you that. Some of the other courses really don't go into details about be able to get a shell to a system, but they do that. That's a really good resource there. And then Practical Pentester Labs, Pentest Labs, is $64 for lifetime access. I believe it's mainly, if not all, Linux systems. You have a VPN access to environment. And there's probably about 12 to 20 systems. And it's a really good resource to learn there. Then also you got your resources from your bug bounty companies like HackerOne and BugCrowd. BugCrowd University has some videos and some tutorials on there, and HackerOne has Hacker 101. This is a great resource. There's an online CTF, so you're actually getting something to practice those skills against. So that's a really great way to learn. The SANS pen testing blog, they have a lot of cheat sheets out there and little tutorials on how to use certain tools. And hackingtutorials.org is created by the creators of Virtual Hacking Labs. There's different tutorials on how to use Nmap. Metasploit, different tools and techniques. That's a great place. Cybrary has some free content. Web Security Academy from the creators of Burp Suite and Web Application Hackers Handbook. Portswigger.net, the Web Security Academy on there is a real good place to learn web app pen testing. They put instead of updating the Web Application Hackers Handbook, they put the content online, updated, as well as online labs. It's totally free and a good place to learn. It's good for anyone from entry level, just learning, all the way up to advanced pen testers. And then you have OWASP.org. You have the OWASP testing guide, as well as the OWASP top 10 and other great resources on there, vulnerable VMs. And then Hack the Box is a good resource, as well as Over the Wire CTF and Under the Wire CTF. Over the Wire is Linux based, and Under the Wire is Windows and PowerShell based. And to get access to these resources, if you go to my website, thehackermaker.com/learning-resources, you can find these links there. And certifications. So certifications are important. Make sure you understand the technology. Make sure you understand the content. Don't just memorize it, because this information is going to be important on an interview. The more you know this stuff, the better you're going to fare in a pen tester interview. Your entry-level certs are your CEH and Pentest Plus, HR people that do work with the government. CEH is a DoD cert, so that one's a good one to have with companies that do work for the government or working for the government. And then you get into your intermediate and advanced certifications, and these are ones that are really going to help you with pen testing jobs. The SANS GPen, the Offensive Security OSCP are two of the most popular certs you'll see for pen testing jobs, along with the Web Application Pen Testing cert from SANS. And then your advanced certs, the GXPN from SANS, and then OSCE from Offensive Security. And as far as the OSCP and GPen, these are similar certs, but there's hands-on labs where you actually have to perform a pen test and hack systems to pass those exams. And that one's pretty good because that kind of shows a little more technical competency and not just knowing the knowledge, but knowing how to apply the knowledge. And all the offensive security certifications are that way, but the SANS certifications are a lot of good knowledge to learn there and well respected in the industry. Job tips, professional networking, go to your conferences, your local meetups, get plugged in, meet people, network, and this is going to help you learn as well as get jobs. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is optimized. Make sure that you keep it professional. This is like your online resume. This is how recruiters are going to find you. So I highly recommend that. Usually I don't go to job sites anytime anymore. You have enough recruiters coming that you don't have to use the job sites. The interview tips: prepare for the interview. Know the OWASP top 10. The OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, no matter if it's a network or web app pen testing job, you're going to get asked questions from the OWASP top 10. So understand those, the different variations of like cross-site scripting or SQL injection and how to remediate those and prevent those items. So know that. And then know the basic stuff like the 3-week TCP handshake and the OSI model, because sometimes your management types, they've been so removed from technology, these are the things they still remember and understand, and they want to make sure you know the basics. So going into the interview prepared, you're going to have a lot better job, a lot better chances of getting a job and doing well in the interview. So here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm very active on Twitter, on the InfoSec Twitter, so reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you out. And so thanks for attending my talk.